Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to a journey into the unknown. Tonight, we invite you to join us as we delve into the sinister side of Uber rides, where ordinary trips take chilling turns into the realm of nightmares. Gathered here are 4 individuals, passengers and drivers, who have experienced the most harrowing rides of their lives. Their encounters with the macabre will send shivers down your spine. If you dare to confront the darkness, we implore you to hit that thumbs up button, leave your spine-tingling comments below, and most importantly, subscribe to our channel. Have funner nightmares. I picked up my next passenger late one stormy evening, rain pouring down in sheets as if the heavens themselves were weeping. The weather seemed to mirror the foreboding feeling that had settled in my gut as I approached the pickup location. The passenger's name was Mark, a man in his late 30s with a haunted look in his eyes. As he got into the car, I couldn't help but notice the dark circles under his eyes and the twitching of his fingers. Something was definitely off about him, but I tried to dismiss it as my imagination running wild. Mark directed me to a remote part of town, far away from any signs of civilization. The streets we drove through were narrow and winding, flanked by dense forests that seemed to swallow up the feeble glow of the streetlights. With each passing minute, my uneasiness grew, but I reminded myself that this was just another ride, and I needed to stay professional. As we drove deeper into the desolate area, Mark's behavior became increasingly erratic. He would alternate between fits of laughter and bouts of silence, staring blankly out the window as if lost in another world. It was as if he was trapped in his own twisted reality, one that I dared not comprehend. The atmosphere in the car became suffocating. Suddenly, Mark turned to me, his eyes filled with a chilling intensity that sent shivers down my spine. He began to speak in a low, menacing voice, recounting a gruesome tale that chilled me to the bone. He described a series of murders he claimed to have committed, each one more horrifying than the last. The details he shared were vivid and disturbing, leaving me on the edge of my seat, desperately hoping that it was all some sick joke or a twisted form of entertainment for him. Fear washed over me like a tidal wave as I realized that I might be sitting next to a genuinely deranged individual, someone whose mind had been twisted and corrupted by darkness. I glanced at the lock button, contemplating whether I should reach for it, but something told me that any sudden movements would only escalate the situation. I had to play it cool, keep my composure, and get through this ride unscathed. As we continued our drive, Mark's delusions seemed to intensify. He started whispering to himself, his voice filled with anger and hatred. The words he muttered were incomprehensible, a vile concoction of profanity and deranged ramblings that sent chills down my spine. The tension reached its breaking point when Mark abruptly demanded that I pull over. Panic surged through me as I realized we were in the middle of nowhere, surrounded by dense woods and an overwhelming sense of foreboding. I hesitated, my mind racing with fear and uncertainty. But his insistence and the cold glint in his eyes left me with no choice but to comply. Mark got out of the car, his figure vanishing into the blackness of the night. I watched, a knot tightening in my stomach as he disappeared into the inky void, leaving me alone in the eerie silence. Time seemed to stand still as I contemplated what he might be planning, my heart pounding in my chest like a war drum. Should I call the police? Should I abandon my car and run for help? Every instinct screamed at me to flee, to escape this nightmare, but the fear rooted me to my seat, paralyzing me with indecision. Minutes stretched into an eternity, the minutes punctuated only by the relentless patter of rain against the car's roof. Just as I was about to gather the courage to take action, Mark emerged from the shadows, a twisted smile etched across his face. He walked slowly, deliberately toward the car, his steps unnaturally measured. My breath caught in my throat as I saw something glinting in his hand, a blood-stained knife, its blade reflecting the dim light of the street lamp nearby. The sight of it sent a jolt of pure terror coursing through my veins. Adrenaline surged through me as I managed to start the engine just as Mark reached the car. He pounded on the windows, his laughter echoing in my ears like a haunting melody as I slammed my foot down on the accelerator, leaving him behind in the darkness. I drove as fast as I could, rain obscuring my vision, my heart pounding in my ears like a relentless drumbeat. I didn't dare look back, afraid of what I might see. The events of that night haunted my dreams for months to come. The sound of Mark's voice etched into my memory like a scar, a constant reminder of the depths of human darkness. I never found out if Mark's story was true or just the delusions of a disturbed mind. But one thing was certain. I had encountered true terror that night, a glimpse into a twisted realm that I would never forget. I hailed an Uber after a long night of partying with my friends. I was feeling a bit tipsy, so the idea of getting into a car with a stranger wasn't particularly appealing. But I didn't want to wait for a cab, and the Uber was just a few minutes away. As I slid into the back seat of the car, I was greeted by a friendly-looking man with a warm smile. He introduced himself as Tom, and we exchanged pleasantries as he started the car. At first, everything seemed fine. The car was clean and comfortable, and Tom was a polite and friendly driver. But as we drove further away from the city center, I started to feel uneasy. The streets were dark and quiet, and I couldn't shake the feeling that we were heading towards a remote and isolated area. My heart started pounding in my chest as I realized that I didn't know anything about Tom or where he was taking me. I tried to calm myself down by making small talk, but Tom seemed distant and uninterested in conversation. He just kept driving, his eyes fixed on the road ahead. After what felt like hours, we finally pulled up to a small rundown motel on the outskirts of town. My heart sank as I realized that this was not where I had asked to be dropped off. I asked Tom why we were stopping here, but he just shrugged and said that he needed to use the bathroom. He then got out of the car and disappeared into the motel, leaving me alone and scared in the back seat. As I sat there, my mind started racing with all kinds of terrifying thoughts. What if Tom was a serial killer? What if he was planning to kidnap me and hold me for ransom? I felt trapped and helpless, and I didn't know what to do. After what felt like an eternity, Tom finally returned to the car. He didn't say a word as he started the engine and drove off into the night. As we continued to drive, I noticed that the scenery outside had changed. The streets were now lined with dense forests, and the air was thick with a sense of foreboding. Suddenly, Tom slammed on the brakes and pulled over to the side of the road. He turned to me, his eyes cold and emotionless, and said the words that still haunt me to this day. "I'm sorry, but I can't let you leave. You're mine now." I screamed and tried to open the car door, but it was locked from the outside. I was trapped, alone, and at the mercy of a man who seemed to have no regard for human life. Tom reached over and grabbed me by the arm, pulling me towards him. I fought back with all my strength, but he was too strong for me. He forced me into the back seat and began to drive again. As we drove deeper into the forest, I could feel my fear turning into despair. I knew that I was never going to make it out alive. But then, just when I thought all hope was lost, I saw a glimmer of light in the distance. It was a small cabin tucked away in the heart of the forest. I don't know what possessed me to do it, but I mustered up all my courage and kicked Tom in the face. He recoiled in pain, and I used the opportunity to unlock the car door and make a run for it. I sprinted towards the cabin, hoping against hope that whoever lived there would be able to help me, and to my amazement, they did. The cabin belonged to an elderly couple who were more than happy to offer me shelter and protection. They called the police, and Tom was eventually caught and brought to justice. But even now, years later, I still have nightmares about that night. The memory of Tom's cold, unfeeling eyes and the sense of hopelessness that washed over me as we drove deeper into the forest will haunt me for the rest of my life. I was having a great night out with my friends, but as the night started to wind down, I realized I needed to get home. I didn't want to drive, so I decided to take an Uber. I requested a ride, and within minutes my driver arrived. He was an older man with a thick beard and a stern expression. He didn't say much as I got into the car, which made me a little uneasy. As we started driving, I noticed that the streets were empty. It was late at night, so I figured it was just the usual quietness of the city. But then I saw something in the distance, a figure standing in the middle of the road. As we got closer, I realized it was a woman, her eyes wide with fear. She was waving her arms frantically, trying to get our attention. I told the driver to stop, but he just kept going. I shouted for him to stop again, but he ignored me. Suddenly the car started to shake violently. It felt like we were driving over rocks, but the road was smooth. I screamed at the driver to stop, but he just laughed and said, "Don't worry, we'll be there soon." I was terrified. I didn't know what was going on. I tried to open the door, but it was locked. I was trapped. We arrived at my destination. I quickly got out of the car and ran inside, feeling relieved that I was safe. But as I turned around, I saw the driver staring at me with a sinister grin on his face. He stood under mine for a good hour. I was terribly afraid that he was mentally ill. He was staring at my window. After more than an hour, he left. I knew then that I had just experienced something truly horrifying, and I would never take an Uber again. As I sat in my apartment trying to calm my nerves, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was off about that driver. His grin, his lack of concern for the people on the road. The next day, I decided to do some research on the driver. I found his profile on the Uber app and noticed that he had a 4.9-star rating. But as I scrolled through the reviews, I saw a few that stood out. People were saying that he drove recklessly, ignored their requests, and even made inappropriate comments. I couldn't believe it. How had this man managed to keep his job with such negative reviews? And more importantly, how had I ended up in his car? I reached out to Uber to report my experience, but their response was lackluster. They apologized and gave me a refund, but didn't seem too concerned about the driver's behavior. It was a disappointing response, but I knew that I had to take matters into my own hands. I started to tell everyone I knew about my experience and urged them to be cautious when using ride-sharing services. I also made sure to leave a detailed review of the driver on his profile, warning others about his reckless and potentially dangerous behavior. Months passed, and I had all but forgotten about my Uber nightmare. That was until I received a message from a friend who had just taken a ride with the same driver. She described a similar experience to mine, but this time the driver had taken a different route and refused to let her out until she gave him a 5-star rating. I was furious. How had this man managed to continue driving for Uber after multiple reports of his dangerous behavior? I reached out to Uber once again, but this time I didn't hold back. I demanded that they take action against the driver and ensure the safety of their passengers. To my surprise, Uber responded quickly and assured me that they would investigate the driver's behavior. A few days later, I received another message from Uber, informing me that the driver had been removed from their platform. It was a small victory, but it gave me some peace of mind. I knew that there were still dangerous drivers out there, but I also knew that I had the power to speak up and make a difference. And that was a lesson I would never forget. It was a bone-chilling winter evening when I found myself hailing an Uber on a desolate street. The air was thick with an eerie silence, and a sense of foreboding hung in the frosty atmosphere. Little did I know that this ride would take me down a dark path, where the true nature of human evil would be revealed. The Uber driver's name was Alex, a middle-aged man with a deceivingly unassuming appearance. His thinning hair clung to his scalp, and his deep-set eyes held a glimmer of something unsettling. Oblivious to the impending nightmare, I settled into the back seat, my breath visible in the cold air. As we embarked on our journey, a palpable tension filled the car. The streetlights flickered intermittently, casting eerie shadows that danced on the barren trees lining the desolate road. The radio crackled with static, occasionally interrupted by snippets of haunting melodies that sent shivers down my spine. Goosebumps prickled my arms, and a gnawing sense of unease settled in the pit of my stomach. I stole a glance at Alex through the rearview mirror and noticed a subtle shift in his demeanor. His grip on the steering wheel tightened, his knuckles turning white. The once familiar route began to deviate into unfamiliar territory, leading us down dimly lit back streets that seemed to hide unspeakable secrets. My voice quivered as I mustered the courage to break the heavy silence. "Alex, why are we taking this route?" I asked, my voice betraying a hint of unease. Alex's lips curled into a chilling smile, and his eyes gleamed with a sinister light. "Just a little detour, my friend," he replied, his voice dripping with an unnerving calmness. My heart pounded in my chest as we approached a desolate warehouse, its dilapidated facade looming ominously in the darkness. Panic surged through me, but I was trapped within the confines of the car, my mind racing for an escape plan. Each passing second felt like an eternity as the weight of impending doom pressed down upon me. Suddenly, out of the darkness, a thunderous roar filled the air as a massive semi-truck hurtled down the road. Its blinding headlights pierced the gloom, illuminating the macabre scene unfolding before my eyes. The truck driver, sensing something amiss, honked the horn in warning, causing Alex to hastily abandon his sinister plans. The truck screeched to a halt, its tires leaving skid marks on the frozen asphalt. The driver, a burly man with weathered features, leaped out of the cabin and approached the scene with a mix of concern and disbelief etched on his face. He surveyed the eerie tableau before him, his gaze shifting from Alex's malevolent presence to my trembling form in the back seat. Without a moment's hesitation, the truck driver reached for his phone and swiftly dialed the emergency line, relaying the distressing situation unfolding before him. Help was on its way, but the air still crackled with tension as Alex seized the opportunity to flee, disappearing into the inky blackness like a phantom. Shaking with fear and relief, I stepped out of the car, my legs unsteady on the frost-covered ground. The truck driver, his voice gruff but comforting, offered me solace as he assured me that the authorities were en route. His weathered face bore the marks of a life lived on the road, etched with the wisdom and resilience of someone who had faced hardships of his own. Minutes felt like hours as we awaited the arrival of the police. The flashing blue and red lights finally pierced through the darkness, casting an eerie glow on the desolate surroundings. Officers emerged from their vehicles, their footsteps crunching on the icy ground. They took my statement, their expressions reflecting a mix of concern and determination. As I recounted the harrowing encounter, the police vowed to apprehend the psychopathic man who had posed as an Uber driver. The truck driver's vigilant actions had saved me from a tragic fate, forever earning my gratitude and admiration. In the aftermath of that horrifying night, as I wrestled with the demons that had surfaced within the seemingly ordinary facade of Alex, I couldn't help but shudder at the realization that true evil could hide in plain sight. It served as a stark reminder that the line between safety and danger can be perilously thin, and that darkness can lurk within the depths of the human soul. From that day forward, I carried the weight of the encounter, forever changed by the haunting experience. The memory of that sinister ride serves as a constant reminder of the fragility of our existence and the unfathomable depths of human malevolence that can be unleashed when we least expect it. Are you prepared to embark on a haunting journey delving into the depths of nightmare memoirs? Will you dare to uncover the chilling secrets that lurk in the shadows? Join us and become a fearless seeker of all things spooky. Subscribe and like if you dare to traverse the shadowy depths with us.